The Texans played another team that was 2-0, well put together, good coaches, and they got embarrassed.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jeez. Welcome in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, Texans fans across the nation.
It's been a long time.
And here in the city of Houston to this Loser Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You guys are not losers, but the Houston Texans are. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you to all of our everydayers coming back to listen to Cody and myself. Cody's up in Detroit, still holding it down for the South. I'm Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, coming back to listen to this podcast. We talking Texans, and we are talking about the 34-7 loss the Houston Texans suffered Sunday to the Minnesota Vikings. Guys, this game was abysmal from start to finish. So we're going to dive into that today. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Cody, we're going to talk about how the Houston Texans can bounce back from this embarrassing loss to the Minnesota Vikings to close out today's show. We'll highlight the defensive performance, and we kind of got to look at that with a grain of salt a little bit. But we open up today's show talking about the offensive performance by the Houston Texans against Brian Flores and that defense. And I just want to say this: Larry Tunsil is getting old.
Look. First
of all, getting old. It's frustrating to watch. Take it away, but this, as a leader of this team, the false starts, now lining up in the backfield, is getting old. You're costing your team big plays.
I agree, John. I definitely agree. First off, let me just say this. We did not have the Houston Texans going 16, 17-0. We didn't have that. We knew that they were going to have tough losses, terrible losses. You know, matter of fact, shout out to one of my all-time favorite female singers, Monica. John, I'm pretty sure you know where I'm going with this. On her first album, she had this song called One of Them Days. She just didn't want to be alone. She just wanted to be alone. Nothing was going right. She was like, hey, it's just one of those days. I brought that up to say for the Houston Texans in Minnesota, I do want to say this. It was literally just one of those days. Things were going bad on offense, defense, even on special teams. We saw Kaimi Fairbairn missed, what was it, like a 34-yard field goal when he just connected on like 4 50-yarders a week prior. It was just one of those days for the Houston Texans, I do want to say. But John, listeners and viewers, this was one of the worst performances that we have seen in a very long time by this organization. To understand how bad this was for the Texans, I'm going to go back to the first half. The first half, the Houston Texans actually won the time of possession 18-11. And yet they were down 14-0. In the first half, their possessions went interception, missed field goals, punt, sack. And the biggest thing to me, I understand that, first and foremost, let me just say this. I think this might have been the first time that we saw CJ Stroud never get an opportunity to get into a rhythm and understand how to attack a defense. And you're looking at a
Jets game, I think.
Since the New York Jets game, and I want to take that with a grain of salt because there was a lot of stuff going on, injuries, the rain, terrible field, he gets hurt. So I kind of want to throw that out. But when you go back and you take a look at CJ Stroud's career as of right now, I've loved how the way, whether it was Dennis Allen, Mike Tomlin, Todd Bowles, he has gone up against some of the best defensive-minded coaches throughout his career so far. Whether win or lose, majority of the time is still coming up in a win. He will still have an opportunity to find a way to attack a defense. Brian Flores' defense, I think this is the very first time that he could not get into a zone to figure out how to attack. And John,
they call Brian Flores the Shanahan stopper.
And I think so. I truly do think so. I think the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, he said he wanted to come up with a defense to stop the Kyle Shanahan offense. That's not looking good for him right now. But Brian Flores is definitely looking good for him right now. And look, CJ Stroud had a bad performance, but all of it isn't on CJ Stroud, man. A lot of it, and John, I'm gonna let you take it away. A lot of it had to do with the offensive line. Well, they had like 11 to 12 penalties this game. About 8 or 9 came on that offensive line, and Laramie Tunsil had about 5 of them by himself. They had that one drive that literally killed the momentum that they started to get, where they had like 3 or 4 in a row. John, listeners and viewers, I want to apologize by the way how I overvalued and overrated this offensive line, because coming into the season, I thought for sure that the Houston Texans were going to have a top 3, top 5 offensive line in this league. I was looking at the fact that you had your 2 right tackles. I was looking at the fact that, Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green, the improvements that they were going to make within their individual games. And I was also basing it off of Shaq Mason, how the way he was able to still be the Shaq Mason that everybody kind of liked and loved back in his New England days. However, John, I'm gonna let you take it away talking about this offensive line, but at least 4 out of those 5 positions, with the exception of Kenyon Green as of right now, have literally been a disappointment through the first, I'm going to say 2 out of the first 3 games. But John, this offensive line, man, I just don't know what is going on, especially with Laramie Tunsil.
I'll tell you what's going on. First and foremost, Shaq Mason is starting to show his age. He looks old. Laramie Tunsil also looks old-ish and not inspired right now. But based off of Sunday's game versus the Minnesota Vikings, there was times where we praised Kenyon Green week 1 because of how he was taking care of those backside blocks. There was time where I saw Cam Akers in the few opportunities he had to run the ball, because he used to play from behind so much, but he couldn't even cut back because Laramie barely touched the body, and that body got free from Laramie and was able to make a play. Titus Howard, just between Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil, those 2 guys were supposed to be your undoubtedly best players on that offensive line. They're combining to make around $30 to $31 million this year, and they were a huge disappointment, the biggest disappointment. And for the Houston Texans, that continued to kill drives. Honestly, I don't have much based off the first go round of me watching this game. I don't have much criticism from CJ Stroud. I don't. It's simply based on why they were not able to score more than 7 points back-to-back weeks with only 1 touchdown scored. What is your offensive line doing? Last week there was no Juice Scruggs in the show. This week you had a full, healthy offensive line, and they were just getting beat. They were just not quick enough to the spots. They were ill-prepared. And I'm going to say this, the Minnesota Vikings defense, give credit to Brian Flores, give credit to their coaching staff, give credit to both sides of the ball. Actually, throughout 4 quarters, they played with such a fast-paced intensity that Houston was never able to catch up. Never able to catch up, never able to get comfortable. And offensively, I did not see from the sidelines, the help from the sidelines, Bobby Sloyd. You knew Brian Flores, and I can't wait to see the percentage, but you knew that he was going to blitz your quarterback, blitz your team, and you knew that he was going to drop back and cover 2. And at no point did I see an offensive line to give CJ Stroud enough time to figure it out, and I did not see at no point Bobby Sloyd and that offensive coaching staff come up with any counter punches to go against the blitz or the cover 2. Not at one point. And it led to CJ, maybe it's at times extending the ball in his hands because he had to try to make a play. They were playing from behind so much. You also saw the offensive line, this unit, when they're good, I'm not going to say when they were, because this could be just a bump in the road. But even when they are good, they struggle with communications, with blitzes. Who's picking up who? That's a problem. Kay Stover should not be blocking John Grenard, who, by the way, had 3 sacks.
That first one, Lord have mercy.
Kay Stover, your rookie tight end, who we love and believe that he has the ability to be a good NFL blocking tight end, he should not be going one-on-one on a crucial down that you need to pick up that first down. And on first downs against the Minnesota Vikings, another bad week. You guys went 4 for 14. He shouldn't be out there on the island when you need help to extend the drive because you have yet to put up points. That shouldn't be what it is. I thought Houston also abandoned the run game a little bit earlier than what they probably should. Now, granted, they were never really able to get anything going on the ground. No Joe Mixon, no Damian Pierce. 14 carries. And they abandoned it early. I know you're down 14. I know you're down 7. I know you're down 4. But you abandoned it too quick. And I did not see this offense find any rhythm at all. At all. And I give a lot of that flack to the offensive coordinator and offensive line getting punked. That's what it is. I'm not calling those grown men's punks. I'm not disrespecting their character. I'm not going, against them personally. That's not the case. But I'm saying defensive line, offensive line, they came and took your money. Well, I tell you what, y'all tried to walk in their trap, and you couldn't walk in their trap. They punked the Houston Texans up front. And I also thought the game plan just didn't suffice the defensive coordinator who you knew what he was going to do. There's no secret about Brian Flores. You just got to beat it. There was no adequate game plan to counterpunch the punches that he was throwing at you.
I do want to mention this really quick before moving on. Kudos to Minnesota's defense. They played good. But, John, this time last year, I was around the Houston Texans daily as the beat writer, as you guys know, and I had an opportunity to get to know 3 players: Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman, and Shaq Griffin. And the year before that, all 3 of those players, including Kamu Grugier-Hill, they were still inside that locker.
Had a good game, by the way.
And the reason why I'm bringing up those names, because when you get an opportunity to be around these players every single day like we do here, not only do you get an opportunity to talk to them and stuff inside the locker room, but you also get an opportunity to get to know them on a personal level. Then when they go on, to different teams and stuff and everybody change jobs or whatever, you still kind of get a sense of who they are as a person. All 4 of those guys that I just mentioned, former Houston Texans, played their behinds off today. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that they went into that game with a vendetta. They went into that game wanting to make a statement against the Houston Texans, because all 4 of those guys, especially Jonathan Grenard, from what I've been told, did not want to leave this organization for one way or another. Of course, the business aspect got into it, man. Those 4 guys set the tone early for the Minnesota Vikings. And that's part of the reason why we're sitting here talking about a 34-7 defeat for the Houston Texans, man. And, your point about, whether or not they abandoned the run, John, I don't think that Bobby Sloyd trusted the running backs that he had, because there was one moment early, I think midway through the first quarter or early in the second, where it seemed like they probably could have started establishing a run a little bit, but I don't think he gave it a fair opportunity to what I was seeing, because Cam Akers did have a couple rushes that was pretty decent early on in the game, but for one reason or another, man, once again, we're looking at a standpoint when the Houston Texans cannot establish the run, this offense does not do anything. But that's enough talking about this offense. We're going to talk about go ahead.
I do want to add this just to tell you guys, I'm going to circle back how much of a game killer Laremy Tunsil was for the Houston Texans. There were 2 moments in Texas where they ended the game 4-14 on third downs. This is in the first half. 2 potential first downs were called back due to Laremy Tunsil's penalties. He had 5 on the game. There was 1 Hutchinson gain of 17. That was called back. Laremy Tunsil, I think that was the illegal formation. Tank Dell, that was called back for a gain of 17. Both of those plays were needed to extend the drive, and they just were not able to pick it up. Sam Darnold threw 4 touchdowns. Defense had a bad day, had a good moment or 2, but overall 4 touchdowns for Sam Darnold, no interceptions. I think that's inexcusable. So we got more on the opposite side of the break. Listen, guys, I forgot to go get me some breakfast this morning. Didn't have time to go out and give me something really quick because I didn't want to miss the game. So I just door dashed it. I'm gonna be real with you. Shout out to Locked On because Locked On hooked us up with some nice promo codes, and I'm telling you right now, you're gonna want to take advantage of it because we're hooking you up with it as well. Use code LOCKEDFALL24. That is LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a value of $10 when you spend 15 or more dollars on your first order. Right to your door. They can even you got special requests and instructions. They even take that as well. So take advantage of the deal right now. Locked Fall 24. LOCKEDFALL24. DoorDash. Whenever you need food and whenever it's time to eat, but you can't make it out the house, DoorDash it, baby. You don't got to stress yourself out. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans, listeners and viewers. Cody, listeners and viewers, Houston Texans. They allowed the Minnesota Vikings to go 4-5 in the red zone, 6-13 on third downs, 1-on-1 on fourth downs. Houston, offensively, they got punked. I think defensively, you kind of got to maybe just look at the issues, especially in that second half. They were only down 14-0 in the first half. Second half, they allowed 20 more points. I think at that point, maybe they were burnt out. My issue with the defense on Sunday, the game plan and the matchups. I mean, I don't know how many times, and the commentators were saying it as well. Why are you 8 or 9 yards off of the best receiver in the NFL?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Why does Justin Jefferson continue to get these free releases? He's the best wide receiver in the NFL. I think Eric Murray has played some damn good football for the Houston Texans. Why is Eric Murray one-on-one with the best receiver in the NFL? That was the problem. I think early on, Justin Jefferson was just that much better than whoever was in front of him. And that allowed the Minnesota Vikings to get drives going and sustain those drives because he was able to make a play. And other than that, man, it was a rough game, man, all around. But defensively, the game plan to stop Justin Jefferson, who had 81 yards in the first half, 1 TD in the first half. That game plan just didn't make a lot of sense. And Derek Stingley missing tackles, we gotta address that as well.
I want to give credit to the defensive line because they did their job as always, and just like last week. And Jalen Petrie, they did what they were supposed to do: disrupt the quarterback and just try to make it tough. However, I think the number one thing that hurt them came more so in the first half, that Minnesota was able to get out to a quick 14-0 lead, and they had to play from behind. And honestly, John, listening viewers, I think the defense actually played even better in the second half, but at some point they just got burnt out because it got to the moment where they were always on the field. And just like what we used to say back when they were sorry, back during the David Culley years, back during the Lovie Smith years, you can only ask your defense to do so much, especially in the second half, because they're going to get burnt out. If the offense isn't doing their job and the defense is always out there on the field, especially going up against an explosive wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, look, a quarterback, I don't know what the hell going on with Sam Darnold as of right now, but he's doing enough to keep Minnesota afloat. It's going to be hard to stop. That's why so much in the second half, it seemed like that they had an issue at stopping the run, John. I just think they got burnt out, plain and simple, man.
Yeah. Houston Texans allowed 100 yards to Aaron Jones. He ran the ball for 5.4 yards pop. Just looking at some of the other trends here, for me, it was just Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips. By the way, Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. He's been phenomenal for that team as well. But they just out-schemed the defensive side of the ball for the Houston Texans. And I didn't see any – I was wondering, hey, man, where are the adjustments before halftime? I think personally the biggest adjustment should have been, if I'm going to lose to Justin Jefferson, I'm going to lose to Justin Jefferson with the best I got. And I don't think Kamari Lassiter, who's been good through 2 games, He's also played two very one low IQ quarterback at this stage in his career and a rookie quarterback who's trying to figure it out. And it just so happens that the following week, Caleb Williams is able to go out there and throw for 300 yards and get his first 2 touchdowns in his NFL career. But I don't think Kamari Lassiter should have been on that assignment. I think I'm going to live and die with Derek Stingley on the best receiver for these teams, especially if I know that the quarterback has the ability to give the best receiver the ball. Sam Darnold has that ability. Justin Jefferson is a game maker. I'm sorry, man. The red zone touchdown to Justin Jefferson where Eric Murray was matched up one-on-one, I thought that was atrocious. Wherever he went, Derek Stingley, I need you right by him. I need it. Like a chirp on the hip. I need it because I trust your ability to give us the best chance to take him out of the game. I don't know what Justin Jefferson was able to do on Derek Stingley the entire game. I do know he had that sideline catch. That was just a beautiful throw. Derek Stingley made a good play on the ball, just a better play by Justin Jefferson. So that you live and die with those. But you can't have those moments. You cannot have those moments, and I got to give a lot of credit to Tim Settle. He had 2 sacks on the day for the Houston Texans. I thought he was a bright spot for that team. Will Anderson with another sack. There was a few bright spots, but overall, it was just, I think, game planning for me that I scratched my head throughout 4 quarters. I'm like, it's not working, and I don't see a lot of changes to help it work, to make the bleeding stop.
You talk about Aaron Jones rushing for 102 for the game as a total. Minnesota rushed for 118 on the Houston Texans. However, John, when you talk about, this defense getting gas, they gave up 81 yards in the second half. 66 of those 81 yards that they gave up in the second half took place in the fourth quarter, man. At the end of the day, look, the defense outside of the coverage that they did with Justin Jefferson, defense, they had a subpar day overall. Defensive line, the front four, they did their job. That offense, man, they got to give this defense something to work with because once again, I don't want to bring up last week's game, but John, this is what I've been saying all last week. Had they went up against a healthier team, a more established team, and a quarterback with a little bit more experience, they would have lost last week's game too, because this is the second week in a row. We're looking at the offense saying, what are you doing? Why are you not giving the defense something to work with?
Yeah. And then we'll talk about how the Texans can bounce back when we close out today's show. You need more from your secondary in games like this, against players like this, against coaches like this. You need more from your secondary. I thought the front four for the Houston Texans, and what I mentioned last week was we gotta win without sending extra blitzers. Get pressure on Sam Darnold from your front four, and I thought that they did that pretty well. I believe he was sacked 4 times, but you need more from your secondary, but you need more from your coaching staff. Once you saw Justin Jefferson was killing the free release and just getting open, an adjustment should have been made. We got more Texans talk when we come back. How can Houston bounce back? And before we talk about how the Houston Texans can bounce back, I want to let you guys know that right now, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, start checking out those latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's right. And right now with FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed whenever you place your first $5 bet. First time, bet your first 5, get your first free $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Again, visit FanDuel.com to place $5 and get started with $200 in bonus bets. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Minimal opportunities for Tank Dell, but not as much as I think that we should be seeing. I'm just a commentator. I call myself the football analyst, but I don't know. But I mean, between our 8 eyes, Cody, I think Tank Dell should have more opportunities, and not having any targets. One of those targets was called back due to a Laremy Tunsil penalty, but no one target, but 0 official targets in the first half, I thought was incredibly frustrating to watch. And I didn't think that Dalton Schultz was a part of this game plan as much as he should have been. Dalton Schultz had 5 targets, 2 catches. One of those catches in the middle of the seams. I know both of those guys between him and CJ would have loved that back, but I didn't think the game plan for this week was adequate enough to lead with a win. But how can the Texans bounce back? Next week, who do they take on?
The
Who's
Jacksonville Jaguars.
Division game. Division game against the Jags. I think for one, I didn't think I was going to see this team this year get punked like that. That's probably my third or fourth time saying that. So you got to get your guys back. A lot of the success this team planned on having this year involved and was going to feature, was going to feature Joe Mixon. So you got to get your guys back, right? Got to get healthy. You may have to start considering something at some point. Can Blake Fisher play guard? Because Shaq Mason is looking old. But for them bouncing back, just getting to a groove early on in the games, man. The Minnesota Vikings just completely sped the game up for the Houston Texans, and they were never able to slow it down. Never able to slow it down. We from Houston, we like to chop and screw things. Was never able to chop and screw it. It just was fast after fast after fast after fast. And I think they panicked. I think the offense altogether, especially the offensive line, panicked. You can't panic under those conditions. When you're in that position, when you're this team that has a lot of expectations to make a deep playoff run, you can't panic. I think next week you just retool, revisit with the Jags. Reset yourself with the Jags, a team that you still got to respect, division rival, but get back to doing the things that you've been successful at, and don't panic when you're not able to control the matchups. Just fight back.
I agree with everything that you just said, but John, the number one thing that they got to get better at is just play more discipline. They had 12 penalties against the Bears, 11 against Minnesota. That's 23 penalties in a 2-week span. A majority of those penalties is coming from your all-pro left tackle and Laramie Tunsil, man. I don't understand how somebody like Laramie Tunsil get flagged 5 times in one game. He's always had issues with penalties, but John, it seemed like every year it get worse and worse. And it's never been this bad. Lord have mercy, it's never been this bad. So that's one aspect that they need to bounce back from. And two, most importantly, man, Bobby Sloyd need to get the rest of these guys involved. Tank Dell needs to get more involved, and hopefully he's okay. Because then he go down with it was some kind of minor injury towards the end of the game. I want to say, he didn't really get targeted a lot until the back half of that second half. But Bobby Sloyd gotta find a way to get Tank Dell more involved. He gotta find a way to get Dalton Schultz more involved. And I get it. Even next week, that if you go into next week game without Joe Mixon and Damian Pierce, I still think you need to give Cam Akers a fair opportunity to showcase that he can give you something in the rushing attack. Because John, when you go back, and I'm gonna do it too, when you go back and you watch that game, I want to say either late in the first quarter or maybe early in the second quarter, whatever the case might be, it seemed like they were starting to get something going with the rushing attack. And yet, I don't know if he just didn't trust the guys that he had back there or not. I don't know, but those are the main 2 things that the Houston Texans got to do in order to bounce back against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And on the defensive side of the ball, look, once again, the D-line, they need to keep doing their thing. They've been looking phenomenal 3 games in, but that secondary, that was already a concern of mine coming into the season. And even though it's been a little bit better than what I thought, they still got some tools that they need to fix going into next week game. But overall, man, it's been a long time since we had a game like this. And look, once again, shouting out one of my all-time favorite female singers, Monica. It's just one of them days, man.
It's just that a Texan wanna be on. Also, hey, listen, man. I'm glad we're highlighting the run game. 14 carries, 38 yards, 2.7 yards per catch. I'm gonna add this before we close out the show today. If the run isn't working, hey man, we don't need to see some of these plays that call for kind of extending time from the offensive line. It's perfectly okay to kind of dink and dunk it a little bit. I just want to add that. And for CJ, at times, don't hold on the ball too long. Get rid of it. I don't have much to say about CJ today. I don't think that if we grade him, it'll be fair because the pressure, the play calling, and Laramie Tunsil's penalties.
Laramie Tunsil, Lord.
Laramie Tunsil's penalty. I've loved Laramie Tunsil as a player, but today was just it was frustrating, a head scratcher. As a fan, I'd be pissed off. As a teammate, I'm like, come on, man, you're supposed to be the best.
Maybe I want to say this really quick. Maybe the Texans need to, I don't want to say hold him accountable a little bit more, John, but when I was around, I just kind of felt like they almost let Laramie Tunsil do like whatever he wants, just a little bit too much. You know, like there's been several times where it's like in practice, he's not practicing, understanding, you know, he had his knee issue last year. So, you know, they was putting him on like load management and stuff, but it just seemed like even when they were bad, it just always seemed like Laramie Tunsil was the one that was kind of just always giving like, oh, that's LT. You know, we kind of, I don't want to make it seem like they just let him do whatever, but I really do believe like after the 2 weeks, how the way he have started this season, which like overall we are only 3 games in, and he already have like 8 or 9 penalties against himself alone. Maybe they need to hold him just a little bit more accountable, man, because that's something that I've always questioned. It just seemed like he just marched to the beat of his own drum a little bit too much. And now it's like, okay, we have expectations now. This offensive line isn't looking that good. And regardless of how you feel about Titus coming back, about Kenyon's development, which has looked really good, Juice development, which has been subpar to say the least, and Shaq Mason, which has been, you know, you say he's looking
decline.
He's on a decline. Old. At the end of the day,
Titus Howard.
Laramie Tunsil, he's still trying to work his way back, but every time this offensive line doesn't look good, everyone is going to look at LT. And I think now maybe they need to say, you know what, LT, we need to stop letting you march to the beat of your own drum or something. I don't know, because something isn't clicking with him this late in his career, this early in the season. I don't know, man.
I agree. And we should see more snaps under the center. I think so. All these false starts. Hey man, you know what? We need to establish the run a little bit. We need to make sure we ain't having all these penalties, and we're in shotgun, and the stadium is rocking how it is. And you may not be. Let's just go in the center.
Maybe, man. Maybe.
Let's just do that. Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.